Could the USA arrest you personally for using a Huawei chip? That is, could a judge in the US of A issue a warrant? And would your country, wherever you may be, would they enforce it and extradite you to America to face criminal prosecution? Well, we're going to discuss that and more today on Ruben Tech, where we discuss all things at the intersection of tech, politics, and finance. And if you haven't already, please be sure to like and subscribe down below. It greatly helps the channel out. Now, first things first, I have to say I'm not a lawyer, and what we're discussing today is a touchy thing. It deals with legal events. And so please understand that this is not legal advice. The past few days, ever since the BIS issued its newest guidance, there are mosquitoes out here, sorry. A lot of people in my comment section, which is the best comment section on all of YouTube, have been discussing if the USA could technically enforce this export control against them and arrest them. And do their phones qualify? And would a Huawei laptop qualify? Well, I'm here to tell you that more than likely, you as a civilian, you as a consumer would not be targeted. Huawei phones are not included in this guidance for the simple purpose that they were created using something called the Huawei Kirin series of chips. And the Kirin series is subject to export controls, but those export controls are different from these. I know it's crazy. The US has so many export controls in China and on Huawei. Hard to keep track of it. But the export controls that target the Kirin lineup basically go after the production of the Kirin chip. So you as an end user are allowed to use the chip, but really they were trying to prevent these chips from ever being created. The latest guidance that was issued, the sanction that they are in violation of, centers around the idea that the government, the USA government, thinks that Huawei likely, they say the words likely, they can't prove it, use circumvented chips from Nvidia and TSMC in the production of these chips. And so these are server-based chips that they are targeting, which is why they list the Ascend series from Huawei. And they specifically list the Ascend 910A, B, and C. They say the list isn't exhaustive, but in my guess, they're looking at any further chips that come out like the Ascend 920. I do not think that it would apply to the Kirin series of chips, which are not server chips and wouldn't be made from the die that they're mentioning, that they're referencing in this document. So now the question is, would you personally ever have this server chip? And the answer is more than likely no. Unless you're the CTO of some AI inferencing company, which if you are, thank you for watching the channel. I really appreciate it. I'd like to have a conversation with you one day. I'm sure the audience would enjoy it. Well, actually, maybe I can't have a conversation with you. I don't know. It could be sanctioned. But anyways, unless you are the CTO of some company in the AI inferencing space, it's not likely that you're going to have one of these chips to begin with. The Huawei Ascend chip, as we covered on this channel, was used in the absolutely phenomenal, you could even say revolutionary, Cloud Matrix 3A4, which Huawei literally surprised the entire world with. So if you are looking at buying that, the US government is basically saying no. Who are they saying this to? They're saying it to everyone around the entire world. They're saying to you if you're in China. So they're targeting companies, and they're saying to these companies, hey, if you buy a CM3A4, if you buy one of these servers from Huawei with the Ascend lineup of chips in it, your executives can be arrested. They can face substantial criminal penalties, and you as a company can face civil penalties as well, substantial civil penalties. This is what the BIS guidance was. So now, would these other countries enforce it? Well, it comes to first, do you have an extradition treaty with America? If you do, then unfortunately, you have to answer now the next question. So you have one bar that you have passed for you being facing penalties. If you don't have an extradition treaty, then you don't have to worry. But if you do, which the majority of the world does, but not everybody. But if you do, then you have to ask yourself, what exactly is our extradition treaty? Now, the majority of the Western world, a large portion of South America, much of South Africa, and a few countries in Southeast Asia, Australia also has it. They have something called double criminality. And what that means is that if you are to be extradited, the law that you broke in America has to be enforceable. It has to be a law that, it has to be considered a law in the country you're in. So the idea is like, if I stole from a store in America, then stealing must be illegal in my country also. Kind of the basics. But you might say, well, that's great because my country doesn't have export controls on China. Very few other countries do. I don't know that any other country does. But then you have to ask yourself, well, how much under the thumb of America is my government? And in the case of Meng, we found out that the Canadian government was very much under the thumb of the American government. Because when her lawyers came out and argued the very obvious double criminality, saying, hey, Canada doesn't have sanctions against Iran. In fact, the Canadian government is doing business with Iran. The prosecutor said, no, actually what we can do here is that in this case from America, they're also talking about fraud, and Meng is guilty on fraud. And they were like, well, wait a second, the fraud is caused by the sanction. They're like, no, it's fraud. So then Meng's lawyers came back and said, well, in Canada, fraud for this bank, HSBC, which was the bank that was involved, would have to result in a monetary loss, i.e., they never faced a monetary loss, so there's no fraud here under Canadian law. To which the prosecutor said, well, their reputation took a hit. Sorry, I can't help but laugh here. So I mean, basically, what I'm trying to tell you is that if your government's under the thumb of the U.S. government, then they're going to find any reason to extradite you. They're just going to make up things like they did against Meng. But yeah, seriously, you can look this up. So they basically said, yeah, well, there's no monetary law. Yeah, that's what it says in Canada. But there was reputational loss. Sorry, there's no monetary loss, but there was reputational loss. And that loss of reputation costs them monetarily. And you would think the judge would immediately throw this stupid argument out, just based on how nonsensical it is. First of all, double criminality, the way it's written in Canada, clearly sounds like it has to have a corresponding Canadian law. The fraud is only from the sanction. If the sanction doesn't exist, there is no fraud. You can't just say fraud. It has to be, why is there fraud? Because of the sanction. But nope, that wasn't it. You defrauded the bank. Okay, fine. That's alleged. But even on that, there is no fraud, because in Canadian law, there has to be some kind of impact financially. There has to be a loss. There is no loss. Oh, wait, the reputation was harmed. How can you prove or disprove that? You can't. Okay? You simply can't. And so what was it? It was simply the fact that the Canadian government was going to ship Meng no matter what, and they knew it. But they didn't ship her because then they had 2 of their citizens arrested. Mind you, that the one was actually spying. They both were involved. One didn't know, allegedly didn't know. But the one said, yes, there was spying activity going on. So China actually arrested real spies. Think about how crazy this is in the world. So why is the US doing this? Well, they're basically taking Huawei off of the world stage when it comes to the server space. And you might think, well, that's great for Nvidia, but I'll tell you that Jensen Huang didn't issue a statement after this. They were asked for a statement. He didn't issue one. And I'm not saying I'm speaking for Jensen, but I believe, this is my opinion, I believe Jensen is a competitor. He has stated many times that he wants to compete in the Chinese markets. He wants the Chinese markets to compete out here. He wants to go head to head with them. And I believe him. This is a guy who understands, right? Again, I'm going to repeat his words. Suffering refines you as a person. It refines the company, refines your soul. Hard work and suffering. You don't want to come into a competition and say, oh, well, I can't face off against my opponent because some random referee that's not even part of the game is taking him out. Just taking him off the table. That's what it does. The CM384. Now, if you're in Switzerland, you're not even going to consider it. If you're in South America, you're probably not going to consider it. If you're in Africa, you're probably not going to consider it. And even if you're in China, I just want to tell you something. Even if you're in China, you could be a Chinese national. Just think about this. Are you going to travel to Europe after you buy the CM384? Are you going to travel to Canada? Certainly you're not going to travel to the US. Right? They're targeting executives. Think about that. This is an attack on other countries' private citizens, trying to prevent them from doing business. President Xi, he'll talk about his 3 principles, and one of them is respecting the sovereignty of other countries. This does not respect anybody's sovereignty. This is the complete opposite of respect. This is absolutely disrespect. Do you hear me? This is disrespectful. And that term isn't strong enough to convey what I really feel, because you're talking about, you're threatening people with arrest. You're preventing them from travel. You're preventing them from doing business on the free market. For what? Because you allegedly think something under a made-up law? It doesn't make much sense to me. But you can let me know down below. Am I right? Am I wrong? Let me know. If you like this kind of content, please hit like. Please hit the subscribe button. Thank you very much. All of you, have a great day.